mainstreaming climate change programs and discussions in our program. We'll have done but we can have 100 programs on politics. But we can never have, sometimes we don't have even a single program on climate change discussion. And those are some of the challenges. And the discussions are not just about one directional, because the research we did was a lot of stories about the government, when the government is going to cope, when the government is planting trees. But we have a lot of experts who can talk about climate change, and especially the adaptation measures we are talking about, the positive things, must come from experts who are working in research institutions with the communities that are succeeding. So how many times do we bring, even, I was asking yesterday in one of the discussions, for example, when floods happen in Budalang, we look at people running. Has anybody ever done a story on how people with disabilities survive in that, or Kano, for example? You know, we always show people with bags, bicycles running away. We have never focused on maybe a person with a disability and what they, you know, there are those specific specialized challenges that people with vulnerability go through in such disasters. But we rarely do that. So there are a lot of things we can do so that we also start helping communities understand that when, for example, a flood happens, we need to take care of people with disability. We need, in a different way, more than this one approach, one group approach. Yet in those communities, we were discussing about floods in one time and the demand for condoms going up in a room. And if you read in all humanitarian approaches, when people are affected with disasters, including the floods, and that was a story in Kilifi, the demand for such things go up. Why? When people are stressed, when people have nowhere to sleep, you know, and you start seeing that the condoms become one of the disaster items when you are going to a disaster. But somebody who doesn't understand or not. So those are the kind of discussion we are talking about. That it's not just, for example, when floods happen or when other disasters like in Muranga landslides, tell me when a person who was taking maybe HIV drugs and his house has been swept away by a landslide, what then happens to that person immediately? You know, so there are people with vulnerabilities who have other extra challenges when some of this climate change. We are talking about Kwale, for example, and the gender aspect of climate change. That when people have cut down almost all our trees, and communities, especially women and daughters, have to walk a very long distance to look for firewood. You see, now how does that daughter study? How will he compare with the brother who is sitting and he has gone for 30 minutes to look for firewood? When they are cooking, remember they're exposed to carbon monoxide when they're using firewood. Who is affected, who has more health challenges is the mother and the daughter. So, you know, in a hospital, for example, when there's a disaster and floods come along with waterborne diseases, who are more affected? Children. Who takes children to hospital in most of our communities is the mother. Now, if the mother spends 3 days with an admitted child in a hospital, who goes to the shamba in our communities is the mother. You see, food security, health is affected. So we need to look at this thing in a more broader sense and more discussions about climate change so that we don't limit it to a few things that is to work.
Interesting. And looking at countries like France and Canada, they have experimented with a funding model where independent media houses are getting grants for environmental journalism. And is this something that you will say that maybe Kenya could explore, or are we already exploring such?
I know, for example, the Media Council of Kenya runs grants. We give journalists some grants to go and do environmental stories, and they have been doing fantastic work. So every 3 months we give some grants to about 20 journalists. You bring a story idea on environment, there's a judging panel that looks at the idea. If it's good, we give you some little money. And other people are doing, I know Kenya Editors Guild, I know other institutions, Aga Khan University has been giving a grant. So a lot of people are doing that in a small way, but it's a good model to help people focus on the environment. I know even politicians in the US gives grants up to Kenyan journalists.